Now this is on, right? And can you test if this is working?
This is working.
Wonderful. Okay, and again we're streaming, so we have people online, and as the same as with the talk before, everyone welcome to write their questions on either post-its or Messenger. We didn't get any questions on Messenger. Oh, this is kind of stupid. Okay, so now you all know. Sorry for that. So you all know Nick Shepherd by now, but we have another person entering the stage, and I don't even know if he needs any formal introduction. But Minik, thank you so much for being here, and I will just let you present yourself.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to see what we can discuss today. Maybe nothing, who knows? But anyway, I was born in a very small place in Greenland. I am a geologist. I work at the University of Copenhagen, and I have been interested, of course, in Greenland's position in the world through my whole life, and what Greenland means to the world. So I guess that would be enough of an introduction. Thank you.
Maybe it's better now? Yes. Perfect. Okay, great. So, Minik, you have been a very clear voice in the debate during the last couple of years, now with the whole Trump wants to buy Greenland situation. And we just heard Nick talk about some of the mechanisms that are part of these colonization and decolonization processes. And one of the things you have pointed out when you have entered the debate, Minik, was that Galatlit Greenlanders often know a great deal about Denmark, but Danes can go about living their lives knowing absolutely nothing about Galatlit Nunaat. So I'm curious to ask you, what do you think are the most important areas that Danish citizens should know more about?
I think that's the whole point, actually, that there's not any particular issues or any particular aspects, but just having a general idea what Greenland is, what kind of phenomenon is it, where is Greenland, Greenlanders, what are they, who are they, and I think also oftentimes you were confronted with, we are asked by a journalist or somebody says, what do Greenlanders mean about whatever, and as though Greenlanders were one thing. So I think it's really important for Danes to understand that Greenland is a part of Denmark also. It's not only some part of the world that is sitting out there and we can be interested or uninterested, but it's actually Danish culture is also influenced by both Greenlandic culture and the past shared history and all these things. So if you have any interest in yourself, you also need to know about Greenland.
So this whole notion of rigsfællesskabet and a connection within that, it's kind of lacking in the Danish understanding of ourselves.
Yeah, I think it is, and I think also that is kind of part of the you could say the issues that are between Denmark and Greenland is that, again, because if you are in Greenland, you need to know about everything because most mechanisms in society are formed in a Danish system, and a lot of is in Danish, and most import, export, whatever is to Denmark and so forth. So there's no way you can have any meaningful existence in Greenland without having a quite deep knowledge of Danish bureaucracy, Danish culture, whatever. And I don't mean that as a kind of just a problem. It's also, of course, it's part of the cultural richness of Greenland. It is also a part of the culture that is rooted in Danish tradition, whatever, that people actually like very much. And I think also you should think that when Greenland kind of was open to the world in the late 40s or early 50s, it was both by strong demand from Greenland itself, but it was also an enormous revelation for people in Greenland to have access to new ideas and music and whatever, as it was in the mid 1800s when schools and whatever happened in Greenland. So I think that it's not only to say that this is a root source of all problems, it's also a root source of many, many joys and many, many qualities of Greenland.
But there's something about the interest that's mostly going in one direction. So I'm curious, how do we get there? How do we make people engage more in this relationship?
I think it's very difficult to make people do anything. It turns out. So I think that the main thing is basically to also to invite this. I think that some of the problem, and I will not say that but some of it is also that during the 1970s, when home rule was first introduced and then self-government, there was also kind of a stay-away attitude to some extent, and at least even if it wasn't from Denmark, it was perceived as though, that Denmark should keep its nose out of Greenland. So I think in some sense, it's also a misunderstanding between two parties, and I think that is quite paradoxical in the sense that it is something that is on a systemic level, but on a personal level, everybody have families both places, and they go everywhere, and they go to Tivoli on the 1st of August. So, all of this. So for the individual, it doesn't exist. But those who are outside of that kind of individual exchange, they would see Greenland as something remote and strange and unintelligible.
Mm-hmm. So now we just heard Nick present what this process looked like in South Africa, and it just seems to me that we are a million steps behind. So I'm curious, Nick, what did you do in this process of developing more interest towards each other, or integrating better educations about each other in schools? Or what did that process look like?
Maybe it begins with the idea of what is a multicultural society, right? And a multicultural society means that there is not only one valid way of being South African, but there are many valid ways of being South African. Different religions can survive side by side, different languages, different foods, different expectations, different holidays, but somehow that's okay. And it turns out that a multicultural society is a very exciting place to live in, I think. The one thing that I noticed about when I came to live in Denmark is after having lived, especially after having lived in the UK, in London, and then in the Netherlands, both of which think of themselves as being multicultural societies in a way, right? And the one thing that struck me about Denmark is that I thought, okay, this is a place that thinks of itself as being a monocultural society. There's only one correct way to be Danish. And you need to assimilate to that, right? It's not like, let's make the space for lots of ways of being. So, I wonder what a multicultural Denmark would look like. And I wonder what the idea of a multicultural Denmark with a substantial indigenous minority would look like, and how exciting in a way that might be. I don't know, as a sort of thought experiment, right? If there was space within the idea of Danishness for all of that.
But there's something about being a multicultural society it's not just that there are people with different nationalities living here. It needs something more. And now we talked about the freezer before. There's a reason why we need the freezer here, because the foodstuffs are not available anywhere else. But would that be, part of being a multicultural society, that you could buy seal in Superbrugsen?
If that was interesting, why not? I mean, I think it's about choice and enjoying difference, and not demanding sameness, And I think there's an enormous enjoyment to be had by celebrating the way in which we are different. Mm-hmm. And yet all of the things that we share, right? So sure, and if it's about food, why not?
Okay, so one of the narratives that we often hear in the house is that, oh, it's such a shame, or we feel so sorry for the Greenlandic people here that they don't have access to whatever, or all of these historic injustices, and oh, it's so sad. And, there's this whole story of Galatlit being victims of history. And I know you have expressed some thoughts about that, but I feel it's so interesting to look at the whole idea of reconciliation and apologies, which has been a big thing. How do you apologize to someone if you shouldn't feel sorry for them?
Is that for me?
Yeah.
Well, I would have no idea. I think to me personally, I think what is mostly missing in the Greenland Danish relation and assessment of where Greenland is today is not so. I mean, clearly there's room for the apologies and for all this, but I think also for celebration, which is completely neglected. That celebrate that Greenland is actually an extremely successful country. The population that is, self-reporting 80% that they live good lives that they like. You have, can anyone in this congregation tell me on the GDP per capita in the world, who is just after Greenland? Which country is just after Greenland in GDP per capita? Wales, basically. United Arab Emirates. So, this idea that Greenland is a failed experiment and everybody are unhappy and everything went wrong and it was too bad, I think is also, so it doesn't mean that we shouldn't address the problems, but I think we should not also do the successes turn those into problems as well. And I think that is some part of the spectrum as it is. So we should definitely celebrate. I think it would make it much more interesting to be Greenlander, to celebrate yourself as a success rather than to try to explain why you were such a fiasco when actually you wasn't.
In addition to that, I would just like to point to, back in 2013, the Danish Prime Minister at the time, Helle Thorning-Schmidt, was invited into, this reconciliation process, and she just said, we don't have a need for that. So it's been a long time, a lot of stuff had happened, and there also was a report, last year I think it came out, and I'm just curious, with the whole global perspective and everything we're going through now, did that position, we have no need for reconciliation, did that age well?
No, I don't think so. But also, there's one thing I forgot to say about this the kind of apologetic aspect of it. And that is that one thing I find problematic in it is not that I think apologies are a good idea when they're needed. So don't get that wrong. But I think also, since everybody in Greenland are mixtures of there's no place in the world that have a higher concentration of descendant of colonialists than Greenland. Okay. So everybody are the direct descendants of the colonialists. And I think in the Greenland, I know people say you cannot make different versions of colonies or whatever, but Greenland, the thing was that it's such a small population, and the colonialists were always married to a Greenlandic spouse, and all their children were Greenlanders living absolutely the same life as everybody else. So we didn't have a colonial class citizen or people who lived in terms of their livelihoods. I mean, we have in my family, we have old photos like every family in Greenland have. You see the people outside the house, colonialist and Greenlander, and you can't tell who are who, and they all stand in front of the same sod house, and all the children had to be brought up as hunters because there was no other livelihood for them. So I think that. So it's not that you shouldn't apologize when necessary, but I think that there's some problem as being a Greenlander, to have to split yourself into a apologetic half and a receptive part for the apology, and I think that's not good for anybody to basically have to split your own personality and your heritage into a good and a bad. So it's not that it shouldn't happen for many good reasons, but I just think it carries a quite heavy burden on people, actually.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Nick? No thoughts at all.
He agrees. You can just nod when we agree. And if you don't agree, it's because you're wrong, and we don't need to discuss it anyway.
I'm learning.
I would like to shift directions a bit, and just we titled this whole conversation "When Trump Isn't Talking About Greenland." It's kind of fun because, as Marie said, we actually made the whole program back in August. So this was on our agenda before it happened, and now that it seems like there's a bit of a decline in conversations as well. Trump did this whole long speech, and he didn't mention Greenland once, and media coverage is declining, all of that. So the question is now, what's happening now? Because from where I'm sitting, the interests hasn't changed. I mean, we're still interested in minerals, what's happening when the ice melts, all of that. But now we're not talking about it as much. What do we do to keep conversation going? Do we need Trump to tweet about Greenland in order for us to have this conversation?
Clearly we don't, but I think it's our own responsibility to not make us dependent on it. I mean, I think that's kind of what we should remember, and I think it is something that many people have been talking about. Oftentimes, when politicians, whoever says, back in the past 20 years, so what can we do to improve the relationship between Denmark and Greenland? And my answer has always been show genuine interest. Just show some absolutely just normal genuine interest, like we do to other. In fact, anywhere else, if you are at a dinner party, sit next to a person and just don't want to talk to them, the chance that it will be a fun dinner is not very large. Mm-hmm. So you just show normal interest, like we do to any other normal people. So I think that this idea that you oftentimes think that people in Greenland are very, very sensitive. They have sore toes all over, and you should never, so to speak, insult the savages kind of aspect. And I think that forget about it. People in Greenland are normal people like everybody else, and just show normal interest and ask about. If you are interested in something, ask about it. Mm. And so I think that it is, again, if we want to keep the discussion going without Trump to inspire it, just be normal people.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's a really important point. Some of the things that...
I wouldn't have said it hadn't been very important.
One of the things that I often hear from, especially students when I talk to them is that then they're at the dinner party and people are really curious. But the questions they get are not always good questions. It will be questions rooted in a stereotypical... So then we're back to, the thing about Danes not knowing enough about Greenland. So ask questions, but please ask better questions, would just be my point then. Going back to the United States and this whole conversation about minerals and supply security, and what is it that the US actually wants? So do you have some thoughts on that? I know Nick has some thoughts on that, but do you want to start?
You continue your nap while I. Yeah. No, I think that's the big problem is that probably there are many things they're interested in, and most of those they discuss are very poorly informed. If it's really their interest, they should interest themselves more in it before they express their hopes and wishes for. But I think that if you look at historically, of course, Greenland has been in the focus of the U.S. for more than 100 years. And when Robert Perry came to the North Pole, he declared, what was called Perryland, that they tried to claim that there was actually a separate island from the rest of Greenland, so it could be American. So it's not Trump who is he maybe catalyzed the way we see it now, but the interest has been there. And I think I think that is basically. The answer to your question is, I think it is because it's long been in the back of everybody's head, and you could say that Trump thought that he could be the hero who finally make it happen. Actually, more so than any specific. Then there's some speculation also, of course, that there are all these kind of the more messianic kind of aspect of it. That some of these strange tech fellows or whatever want to go to Mars and colonize the universe and all kinds of stupid things. They also have this idea of where to create a kind of a haven for non-governmental zones where you can act out all your idiosyncrasies without having government regulation, and that could also be part of it actually in this sense that Greenland is the only place where there are very few other people that you actually have empty space, so to speak. So Lebensraum, as it has been known before, could also be part of it. So I think that. But I think, again, to be honest, the discomfort of this is we have no idea what it actually is. Mm.
So you talked about this historic rhythms of history, and are we in a moment like where everything is about to shift, and is that a part of why the US has so much interest in Glacier?
I mean, that's a big question. So I'll cycle back a bit, and in terms of Trump's interest or not in Greenland, in that record-breaking State of the Nation address that he gave, which went on for hours and hours and hours and hours, he hardly mentioned Iran, right? So what he's saying is not a good guide to what's going to happen. I mean, if I was in Cuba I would be worried at the moment. I think in terms of Trump's intentions, the U.S. behaves currently like a rogue state, right? I mean, they just do what they want, and they often is highly personalized. So it's highly personalized in the figure of Donald Trump, who we have to, I agree completely with your analysis. Trump is a real estate developer. He's interested in property, real estate, and I think as well he's interested in legacy because he's a huge egotist. Everything has to have his name, right? In huge gold letters. Trump this, Trump that. He sees this as a legacy project, I think. I think you're exactly right. It's something that's been on the agenda for US presidents for a long time. In the way that Iran has, in the way that Cuba has. And I think Greenland's in the same optic. Yeah.
Mm. But there's no doubt this is a very strange moment in time. And it also it feels uncertain and uncomfortable, and I wrote to my cousin who lives in Sisimiut, and her reaction was that either we're in the spotlight of the entire world or we are invisible. And to me that just captured what's going on very much. And she also said to me, I actually would prefer being invisible. But somehow that doesn't seem like a solution going forward. So the big question now is, how do we find like a place in between, somewhere in between?
I think there's actually another saying that's really good. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Which is, I think, also the case. But I think actually the in-between part is quite interesting, because I think that, again, going back to the Greenland history and the way we portray history, and I think also as Greenlanders, oftentimes we have bought into kind of a modern, you could say, generic colonial storytelling. I heard you talked about the elders, for instance, which is a concept that doesn't exist in Greenland. But it's Inuit in Alaska and Canada who have that. But we have taken it into Greenlandic to explain everything, although it's actually completely absent from Greenlandic. The elders say, touch them down a steep cliff and get rid of them. Not quite, but anyway, I think the history, if you look at Greenland, it's actually quite different from the other Arctic or the other Inuit nations in that I think there has not been an Inuit generation in Greenland who haven't known about the outside world, about Europe and that part of the world. Because we have had whalers and whatever, the Norse were living in Greenland when the first Inuit arrived, and at the same time you started having Portuguese cod fishermen and whalers and whoever coming and trading and whatever. So Inuit in Greenland have grown up, so to speak, as a nation with European influence and trade and understanding and even share of words and whatever. Then you have, if you took a boat somewhere and got off, you wouldn't be able to tell if you got off in Labrador, in Greenland, in Norway, in Scotland, in Faroes, in Iceland, in even Western Jutland, because a port town, fishing port, places have the same architecture, the same city structure, the same everything. So we have this shared cultural domain, the North Atlantic. Actually, we used to have a defense union that was kind of named after the fact that we all inhabit the rim of the North Atlantic. But I think we often forget that we have a 1,000-year shared history around the North Atlantic region, and that to me is our place. And I think we also heard that. In the geopolitical talk, that of course closer union with, we talk about EU, but I think remember Canada in that context, because Canada is a like-minded nation and we have shared cultural domain with and cultural practice with all these countries for 1,000 years.
Mm. And the US is also showing some interest in Canada. We talked about that the other day. Would you share what we talked about?
I forgot to add Canada to the list of places that should probably be nervous at this moment with Trump. I mean, yeah.
Okay. So I think we're at a point in the conversation now where it would be very fruitful to invite all of you into the conversation. And what I would propose is that we take a break, but you have to use that break to discuss with your friends or maybe with someone who you don't know, and write something on a post-it, let us have it, and then we will continue the conversation, but with all of your inputs. So yeah, stretch your legs, talk to a friend, gain a new friend, and write a question on a post-it. And I'll give you 8 minutes.
World highlight over the forgotten. I don't think they'll be forgotten very soon again. Unless we end up with some kind of settlement for how to go forward. No, sorry. Jamen, det er et godt spørgsmål. Så jeg tror, at det har noget med national forståelse at gøre. Nej. Så det er jo en del af selvforståelsen at have kongeriget, og hvor Grønland i hvert fald arealmæssigt udgør en stor del. Men
and about how to calculate the value of
det er rigtigt. Så er der en anden ting, jeg har ikke rigtig været nævnt, men når man taler om Grønland, så er der faktisk en ret stor del af Grønland, der bor i Danmark og hele Grønland. Ja, nemlig. Så det er der også et eller andet aspekt. Men det er rigtigt, og som sådan, så skal det jo være grønlændernes eget valg, hvad de gerne vil. Jeg tror stadig, at de kan være helt selvstændige, uden tilknytning, stærk tilknytning til enten USA og Danmark. Eller Canada, som i virkeligheden er mere tilknyttet til. Det er ikke meget, man har hørt til Canada i forbindelse med hele diskussionen om Grønland, men i virkeligheden, både når man kigger på globusen, og når man kigger kulturelt, så er de i virkeligheden tættere forbundet med præcis. Kender du den historie med Hans Ø, Hans Island? Der har været en geopolitisk strid mellem Danmark eller Grønland og Canada, fordi der var en ø, hvor landegrænserne var uklare. Og så for ligesom at bevise, at man har en interesse i den ø, så har henholdsvis Danmark og Canada skiftevis gået i land på den der ø, så de sendt nogle tropper, og så Danmark har så stillet en flaske snaps, og den har canadierne, så vil over hente, og så har stillet en flaske Canadian et eller andet sprit. Så der har været sådan en peaceful fight, en fredelig strid, og så for nogle år siden, der fik man så lavet traktat på, at man skulle dele øen på tværs. Og den er totalt ubehagelig. Det er et klippeskær. Men igen, begge parter var interesseret i den nok af hende til undergrunden. Så rent faktisk så deler vi landegrænsen direkte.
Det er også det, I skriver, ikke? Altså det der med, at den faren, så kan man jo ikke, ligesom bare lægge sig op, og så lige pludselig, man er nødt til at finde en løsning i hele. Men samtidig tænker jeg også, at jeg synes, det ikke har en utrolig
det er meget interessant at høre den sammenligning med andre kolonimagter. Nå, du er jo pludselig i hot seat, hot chair. Ja, ja. Ja. Ja, ja.
Ja, men jeg synes også, at det er lige som vi må skole.
Når det er stadig ikke live.
Det er sådan noget, jeg husker.
Ja.
Det er faktisk ikke ret godt.
Men så er det man ligesom altså folkeskolen er jo der i velfærdssamfundet Danmark, og det man vælger.
Det er ret interessant, at nogle af de modeller, de eksisterer der i dag.
Ja, jeg tror, det er helt nyt, at man er begyndt at snakke kongelighed og et vildt. Det er jo det, der bliver lagt op til. Det er et vildt kongelighed. Men det er også et vildt grundskole.
Men man er med i kongelighed.
Nej. Ja.
Det er sjovt, at fordi at kongelighed er bedre, hvorfor er kongelighed bedre?
Jamen, altså kongelighed er jo det, der er.
Ja. Okay. Altså efter en verdenskrig. Ja.
Ja, fordi egentlig rigsfællesskabet siger, at vi er flere riger, der har et fællesskab. Det anerkender en af jer.
Ja. Ja.
Der er en af dem. Det er interessant, hvorfor kongelighed
Ja, tilbage over det.
er jo mere på det andet.
Men det er kun i Arktisk Råd, vi laver på i Danmark.
Ja.
Så man sidder jo ikke i kæmpestruktur. Nej,
men der er trods alt nogen, men det er rigtigt, og den er uforvilligt, og forældrene troede, de kom tilbage, eller ja, de kom så også, nogle af dem kom tilbage, men så var de jo danske mennesker. Det er heller ikke, det er godt, hvad der er foregået der.
Det er bare en historie. Selvfølgelig ikke de optaget, men man kan ikke klare. Det er klart. Men i forhold til så jeg ved ikke, det er altså man kan sige,
ja, det er jo mixet meget.
Hvordan skal det? Og for Grønland skal det danske test for at blive dansk statsborger.
Ja. Men de har også jo samtidig et stykke hen over inkluderet i den danske, så de har jo lidt begge.
Men det forstod jeg meget, fordi folk er stolte af at være udsendt fra et samfund, der taler jo nogen, der taler det modsatte i Danmark.
So if you have a post-it with a question, put it in the air. Nothing. Okay, great. Det er okay, jeg har det varmt. So welcome back, everyone. Did you gain a new friend? Perfect. So thank you for all the questions. I will try to go through them all. This microphone is still stupid. I'm so sorry. There has been a few questions on Messenger as well, so thank you for that. But let's just start with the Messenger one. So someone asked, when did you last see or read a story in the media about Galaslinunad that made you think, oh, this story actually tells something that we don't hear about all the time? Do we ever get those stories, to be honest?
I can't recall having read that story, no. I don't think so.
Yeah, so there's, are there any journalists in the house? Martin, you go tell that story.
I'm just saying, there's one here.
Yeah.
One available.
Perfect. We'll tell you all the interesting stories, then you can print them.
It's quite interesting, the dynamics, because here where there's been so much press interest, every journalist who come and ask a question, they want you to give them the same story as you told the other journalist, but they want their own version of it. So they can publish it and print it without paying royalty or whatever. So, but they're absolutely not interested in anything other than the other one they heard or read in the newspaper. That goes for you too.
No, we get that a lot in the house as well. There has been so many journalists calling, and the same the last time, and they all want the same story, and they're all interested in talking to someone from Greenland, and it just gets a bit tiring. We can tell you more about it if you come and ask. Yeah. So then another question is, you know, if this agenda suddenly goes away, I mean, now we have all these conversations going on and a lot of interest. What happens to an institution like the Greenlandic House?
Well, again, if I should continue, I think that absolutely nothing has to happen to the Greenlandic House, because again, Greenlandic culture exists in Greenland and in Denmark, and there's a quarter of all Greenlanders live in Denmark approximately. So of course the Greenlandic House should be here. Maybe it will be doubled in size because there'll be more visitors coming to see. So no, I think that it's not, the Greenlandic House is not here to solve a crisis or to I mean, they're here because Greenland culture is here, and that's why we have a cultural institution like everywhere else. Again, you know, just it's a normal thing.
Yeah. Great.
And if only they would open their kiosk, you know, they could even be more relevant.
Yeah, we hear that a lot. Why isn't the shop open all the time? Then, in relation to that, actually, if Trump turns out just to be this crazy guy, and he goes away, everything goes back to normal, back to a status quo. Then will the relationship between Denmark and the United States go back to normal as well? Will we, return back to this U.S. Big Brother kind of situation?
I think there's a sort of a hopeful narrative that says that Trump is just a kind of an aberration, right? Like a glitch in history, and that as soon as Trump goes, then there's a reset, and the relationship between not only Denmark but the whole of Europe and the United States kind of flips back to what it's been, pretty much since the Second World War. I would say that's an extremely hopeful narrative, but unfortunately I don't think it's a likely narrative. So from a personal perspective, I've spent time in the US teaching at different universities there. Most recently in 2015-16, around the first Trump election. Remember when he was debating Hillary Clinton? Seems like a million years ago, right? And it seemed so bizarre at that moment that someone like Trump was running for president, and no one could believe he would be elected. And now he's just been re-elected. So, I mean, my take on that would be that Trump he's not an aberration, he's more a symptom. And he's a symptom of deep underlying structural changes in US society. And what that translates into is that Europe as a whole has to really understand that we move into a different relationship with the US going forward, and that is the new reality now. And I think there's been a tendency to see the US as kind of a big brother, you know, looking after you. That's gone. That's history. My most recent trip to the US, a lot of people just don't like Europe there, right? And I mean, that's the reality. They don't. And yeah, I mean, that's what you live with. And the current administration actually really don't, right? So the dislike of Europe and Europeans for them is, I would say, like gut level, like visceral. They really feel it. They don't like Europeans because they feel culturally inferior or whatever, right? But it's just a deep, deep dislike, and that's a really tough thing to encompass. But I think it's probably the reality of where we are. Not sure if.
No, I agree.
Then I have a question for you, Minik. Do you recognize Nick's analysis on colonialism in a Greenlandic perspective?
I think that's I think it's a very broad question, because I think there are clearly some aspects that are relevant, but I think that, again, I don't think that colonialism is one size fits all, and I think that there are very many different histories, and I think the devil is in the detail. I think that I don't think that you can say that, oh, there's no problem, everything was. That's not what I'm saying, but I think that if we try to guide Greenland's future and understand its past by taking everybody else's example, I think is not helpful. It's better to actually go down and look at our own past, and not only look at our past, but also have open discussion about what we wish for our future. I think that's the main problem in the Greenlandic, political discourse now, is not so much which direction, but people talk about independence as though it was a fixed phenomenon, but nobody talks about what form, why would we like it, what would it do for us that we don't have now, and what would it, make us not have that we don't like to have, right? All these things. To think that it's much more fruitful to put a serious effort into understanding the past and using that to discuss what we want for the future, rather than to say, okay, we would like, this packet of oats or this packet of washing powder relative to this one on the shelf. I think that'd be more helpful. But I think, of course, it's really important to understand what's happened other places as well, because it makes your eyes see some things maybe exaggerated some places, or make you see that in a smaller, bigger version in your own home, and so forth. So it's not that you shouldn't learn from that as well, but I think real, honest, again, interested, curious, trying to understand Greenlandic past would be a very good thing for most people, and interesting and fun, rather than taking from the shelf these package deals for understanding colonial history.
So as someone coming from Denmark, I feel like this translation into a global context is very fruitful and helpful, and would be in teaching situations as well, because you mentioned right now there's a lid on things, so we're trying really hard to keep that lid on, because if we start making these comparisons and we start realizing, we now being the Danish people, realizing, oh, it looks a lot like something that we don't see ourselves as, that's not very comfortable. And to put that into a classroom or into a media conversation or whatever can just be, it's not nice, it's not easy, it hurts, it's uncomfortable. But I think it's a very necessary step.
I think that's absolutely true. It is, but I think also it's really important, of course, that you also understand that Danish history is. I mean, I think that's in this comparison, if you say, which oftentimes happen, that you take Denmark today versus Greenland 100 years ago, and compare them, because you know one of them and you think you know the other one. And so I think if you look at Denmark, you had forced labor for people in the agri sector until 1916 or something. you had people could not move between, you know, if you see Hans Christian Andersen had to have a passport to go from Odense to Copenhagen when he came. So all these civil rights and whatever that we just, you know, also see that where was Greenland at the same time relative to other places at the same time rather than today. So it's not to iron out the problems, but I think it's just much easier to understand and to explain these things if you see them in a context they happened in, rather than comparing them to kind of a conceived situation globally.
So you're kind of an outsider in these whole questions, but you also teach students from Denmark who has gone through the whole education in Denmark. So do you think it would be easier for Danes to understand their own situation if we start teaching about this earlier? Or is it fruitful to put Danish colonialism and the relationship to Greenland into a global context?
Let me say first of all that I completely agree with Minik. I mean, it's not like one size fits all, right? It's every situation is unique, but within every unique situation, you find similarities and you find context that you can learn from. To me, the really interesting thing about the relationship between Greenland and not only Denmark, but the whole North Atlantic is the long 1,000-year history of contact that you referred to, right? I mean, that is extraordinary. So in many African contexts, colonialism is 2, maybe 3 centuries deep. That's it. And here you're talking about 1,000 years. You really have to think about that idea of hybridity and about the way in which you have made one another, right? I mean, you have come into being together as a kind of hybrid society, not as a pure separate anything, but as a kind of togetherness. So in terms of teaching colonialism in Denmark, which I do at Aarhus University, to master students, if you say colonialism, most Danish students say long ago and far away. Right? That's how it goes. And then you have to explain why you're even teaching this subject at all, right? And the other interesting thing, colonialism often cuts to tropical colonialism, and not so much to Arctic colonialism. So I think all of these things are in place. So just applying that word colonialism to as a term to analyze some of these contemporary relationships, you know, even that there's a kind of resistance there, which is interesting. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, we're not used to that. So as kind of a follow-up question to that, I would just like to ask both of you, what would Denmark be without Greenland?
Denmark would definitely still be Denmark, but it would of course be a different Denmark. And I think you could say, I mean, no place on Earth would be the same without all the other places, and we are all a result of interaction. But I think the reason why Denmark and Greenland I think both parts have benefit from the union, or whatever we will call it, the kingdom construction, at least today, and that is that they are so different that they offer broader spectrum of possibilities for those who live either place. So I think we should not look for the kind of similarity. Of course, something has to be similar to be together, but I think the best part of Greenland and Denmark is that they're different. And that means that they offer both populations a broader spectrum of possibilities than without.
You want to add something? What's Denmark without Greenland?
A poorer place and more boring.
I could hear you saying that.
So then I have a question. It's a very specific question, and it was actually addressed to you, Nick. But that was why I said I don't think you'll know how to answer this, so I'll ask Minik instead. So it's about borders that are drawn, that are like leftover borders from colonial times, and the kind of sammenhængskraft. Hvordan siger man det på engelsk?
connectiveness of yeah.
Co-
Sticky stuff.
Sticky stuff that that holds culture together. How does that look in Greenland? And is there a division between West and East?
There's definitely a division, and it's one that has both been. I mean, there's clearly. I think Greenland is at least 3 cultural domains. So you have the far north, where you have Inuit, and then you have the West Greenlandic population and the East Greenlandic, and they have been culturally kind of. They have been in connection, but they have developed different cultural traits and different tradition, whatever. East Greenland has also been slightly isolated from West Greenland for a number of reasons. So it was only colonized in the 1900s rather than in the 1700s. And East Greenland was also very, very close to total kind of extinction of the population for many reasons. So East Greenland has its own domain. West Greenland is more connected internally. Then you have the Melville Bay separating far north Greenland from West Greenland. So you have these 3 cultural domains. But I think also it's quite interesting that they are all Greenlandic though, and they all had traits and connection to one another. And I think I think one thing that is kind of an interesting thing is, had it not been for that Denmark claimed sovereignty over Greenland, Greenland could have been small Greenlandic communities divided by different countries in different colonial settings. So in some sense you can say that Greenland as a nation that has identity as a nation with one area of land with one more or less contiguous cultural domain is actually something that was only established in the 1930s, and I think we should all be very grateful for that. And I think if you look at the whole Arctic, the idea that where the borders are, I mean, Ellesmere Island, the northern Canadian islands became part of Canada in the 1950s or 40s or something like that. And they were bought because they were privately owned by a Swedish oceanographer called Sverdrup, who had mapped them, and he sold these islands to Canada. So it's not like, we have this area up there in the Arctic there through thousands of years. We have had all these. The idea of the national state and the borders is a quite new one, but also actually in that, you say, it's really fortunate for Greenland that the Norwegians tried to steal part of East Greenland, so it actually solved in international court that Greenland is one unity. And it's, you could say, then it became Danish sovereignty, but at least from a Greenlandic perspective, unity, I think, is extremely important.
You don't have any details to add about the difference between East and West? No, okay, fine. Then there are a couple of questions about wealth and values. So let's just talk about this question. So what do you think is typically ignored that stems from colonial wealth in Denmark?
To me, or?
Both of you.
Do you wanna? So if we're talking about colonial extraction, it takes many forms, right? It can take the form of resources, minerals, fossil fuels. For the Spanish and Portuguese colonizers in the New World, it took the form of treasure, of precious metals. A lot of the silver, bullion, and gold getting into Europe and then finding its way to Southwest Asia. Middle East was coming actually from South America. Something that's often overlooked in that process of extraction is labor power, human labor power. So there's an enormous extraction of human work that also happens often as part of a colonial process. And the most notorious example of this, of course, that we all know about is the transatlantic trade in enslaved people from Africa, right? Which was this enormous centuries-long transfer of labor power from Africa to the New World. So all of these things have to be written into the equation of extraction, and putting value on that is people have tried actually. So there are calculations around, but it's a tricky business to do.
I think that for Greenland, I think the most significant. I really don't think that the minerals have had even the cryolite, whatever. I think it's an issue to some extent, but I don't think it's a major export of value. So that, but I think marine living resources, first whales and oil and seal oil and all that stuff, and then later fish. But actually also through all those 1,000 years, people have been going up to make fish. I think actually in terms of the slave trade, of course, Greenland was not part of that, but some of the cod fisheries are probably because that's what they fed the slaves when they were slaving away in the cotton fields. So the trade of dried fish product, which is durable and can be basically kept indefinitely and be fed to people who are very hungry, is probably another kind of value that was extracted and used for no good, unfortunately.
So this question, it's also about how to calculate the value of colonization, and that's very difficult. I hear you both say that, but just the fact that mentioning extractivism and earning money on Greenland after the whole documentary on the cryolite, it was just such a huge debate, and people were so angry. So, where do you think all that emotion come from?
I think it's very clear where it comes from. It is, I think the whole discussion about the film was kind of got off the tracks, because I think the point was that those who liked the film was because it portrayed that Greenland was not a sink for value, but it was part of value generation for both the countries together and for Denmark, and probably also for others. Whereas those who kind of disputed there was the numbers were disputed. I really honestly think that the numbers are way off. But that's not the issue. I mean, I think that's why the discussion kind of was so failed, because it proving that the numbers were not correct and the numbers to those who liked what the film was telling were not the point. The point was that Greenland was also generating value in many ways for Denmark, and Greenland was not just as a basically endless sink for expenses for Denmark. And that also that Greenland was kind of always a client, so to speak, to Denmark. So I think that in that sense, the film was seen by there's two different films seen by two different audiences, basically.
What was your reaction to the documentary and to the Danish reaction to the documentary?
More or less the same. I mean, it's strange that the point is about extraction, right? That's the point. And then it became an argument about the exact value of how much was extracted, but the underlying thing is about extraction, really.
Good. How are we on time? 30 minutes. Oh, then I think we'll take a break before we actually need to. I have. Yeah, you must be tired of listening to us. Okay, so this is a long one. Let me just see. Okay, let's do a shorter one first. What do you think about rigsfællesskabet?
First of all, I think it's a fact, and I think it's also in many ways a functioning construction. I think that again, Greenland has self-governance, which is which is quite extensive, I think, and can definitely be that. I think there's probably also a lot of weaknesses in the construction, but I think I'm not sure. I don't know much about the Faroe Islands, but I think that for Denmark and Greenland, again, with 1/4 of the Greenlandic population living in Denmark, I think that it's also something like that is a necessary thing. I think one thing that has been, again, it's a little bit like the discussion about the future and what is that we think that we have fixed entities that we have. So is it the rigsfællesskab or is it a rigsfællesskab? And I would think that a rigsfællesskab is a good idea. The may not be so much, because it has not been changed over a couple of decades, basically. And I think there's no reason why a rigsfællesskab could also be a union of states that have higher degree of sovereignty individually and so forth. So I think that, I have no particular solution to what it should be, but I think it should be not discussed as the, but as an a. and then find out if it can be adjusted and be more useful for all parties. But I think, and as we heard in the geopolitical talk, having Greenland sitting in the where it is and with neighbors as it has, without some other very strong forces of association, would be very difficult, I think.
Just to add to that, so the English translation is often Commonwealth, right? And it's slightly misleading because the British Commonwealth, for example, is a commonwealth of independent states. They're politically sovereign. In fact, it was created as a way of continuing the association with Great Britain of its former colonies after they achieved political sovereignty, independence.
I think also you can say that Greenland also is, apart from the Danish, it's also an overseas territory relative to the EU. So Greenland also have other kind of, it's still part, of course, and Danish sovereignty, so forth, but it also has other kind of political connections that are formalized.
I just remember having a conversation with you at some point, trying to explain rigsfællesskabet, because it's not a commonwealth, it's not like the realm, it's not like anything else. I mean, is there any other nations that have this construction? No, it's a strange thing. Yeah.
I mean, I think if there are many large nations, or we call them, that actually consist of relatively, you could say, self-governing states. India, Brazil, many of these places also have local domains that have various levels of. So I think, again, there's probably a continuum between something that we know and something that's maybe unique.
Yeah.
I think there's also, the kingdom, before the kingdom was Denmark and Norway also, and with the Biland and Norway, Iceland, Faroes and Greenland. So it has also historical background that you can have kingdoms that actually have more than one nation.
Okay, then
I think that's why it's called a kingdom today, in Danish.
Yeah.
In English, sorry.
Will you check if there's anything else on Messenger? Otherwise, I have the last post-it. And this is about legislation. So the question is, do we need some kind of legislation in order to keep this conversation and focus on Galatlit Nunaat going? So something about, we need to teach this many classes in primary school about Greenland, and we need that many lectures in the universities about, this is a must on a curriculum. Is that the way to move forward? So we don't lose this momentum, or should we just, wait and see what happens?
It's always a good idea to wait and see if something happens. But I think that it would be a good idea to have it on the mandatory curriculum for school, primary school, to have some level of Greenland. When I took Danish education back then, you actually learned something in Norwegian and Swedish and Greenland, and that was kind of part of the curriculum that has completely disappeared. But I think also I heard one good idea, or maybe it's whether it's good or not, I don't know. But somebody said if we bring back Store Bededag, why not call it Rigsfællesskabsdag instead? Since most of us don't pray on that day, but maybe we could then talk about the Rigsfællesskab.
A mandatory day for talking about rigsfællesskabet.
You get up at 7, at 8, you start talking about Rigsfællesskab.
You'll be having suasat for dinner as well. Okay, then. Oh, no, a lot of, yay! Wonderful. What would the most important element be in a future without Trump? What are we going to do to him? The most important element in a future without Trump.
I feel we should open that to the floor.
In a common future.
Denmark, Greenland.
Oh! So in a shared future.
I think the same as would be again. I think that to have an open discussion with one another and with oneself, so to speak, about what is it that where do we want to go, what is it we hope for our future, and then try to shape it, Trump or no Trump.
To add a word, I mean the hopeful interpretation I think of the present moment would be to take this historical moment where this relationship between Denmark and Greenland is so much in the news, and to turn that into a reset in that relationship and an opportunity to actually have an honest conversation that's long overdue. Maybe that's the opportunity that lies.
So this one is about minerals and mining. When you say minerals and mining is not a big thing, what do you think the people and descendants of... Oh no, I have to say stuff in Greenlandic. Kutlisat, Ivikdut, Nasak, and of course Amitsut say about that?
I think that if you ask about the Kutlisat, which is correct, there's a coal mine on the up in the Disco Bay area, and it operated from the 40s, I guess, into the 60s, I would say. And I think that that's correct. That there was extraction going on there. The extraction was to feed the energy expense for Greenland. It was actually a mining project that was started because the cost of coal, imported coal, for Greenland households was a high burden on people's economy. That's why they opened a coal mine for that reason. So you could say it was an extractive industry, but it's actually not for export. It was for the Greenland home market, and it was terminated because it turned out the coal didn't burn. It was not completely, but pretty much. There was already everybody told that it was a house that burned to the ground. The only thing left was a coal heap. But the other was, of course, that it was not economical relative to. At that point, you started getting oil as a main heating, petroleum, and so forth. So I think that it was, and I think it was clearly a tragedy in a Greenlandic context that it was closed as a town. But that had nothing to do with it. It had to do with the extraction not being economical and not necessary. And the extraction, when it was started, was for the purpose of having a supply security for heat to Greenlandic houses. And the other one was
Ivikdut, Nasak, Amitsut.
As a Nasak, there has been no mineral extraction at any scale. There's been plans to do something, but it is not a place where there's been mineral extraction. And Ivikdut, of course, there's a cryolite, which is a very clear example where clearly value was exported out of Greenland. There's also a little bit more than the general story that everything was taken, nothing came back to Greenland, because 30% there was a tax of 30% on the export value that went into supporting KGH, which was running at a deficit at that time. So it basically meant that the Greenland the company buying sealskins and so that was partly subsidized because to put more value into Greenland society. So it's not. I would not say that this is the purpose of forming the mine or anything, but it actually something did come back to Greenland.
Good. Then I have two questions. One is, does the fact that Denmark portrays itself as one of the most progressive countries on earth make it more difficult to discuss its colonial past and present?
Yes. I think, right? Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of the lovely things about the Danish self-image is that people see themselves as doing good in the world, and as providing a shining light, in the world, and then to put that together with some of these kind of harsh ideas around colonial past and presence. I think it's very difficult to put those two things in the same frame. So.
Well, I can only agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and as someone who has been teaching a lot of Danish students, both the smaller ones and the high schools ones and the university ones, yeah, this is difficult because you have to make a complete switch of your own understanding of self in order to even start having a conversation. So it's hard. And this question is, so what do the Danes actually get taught about their own colonial heritage in high school? And right now it's not on the Danish curriculum. There are some, I'm looking to you, Thea, because we have a history canon, but that's only for primary school. So in high schools, they're not, you know. Yeah. So great news, there are plans, they want to do something about this. Yeah, but right now it's only, you know, mandatory in the history teaching for primary school in Denmark. And that's not even specifically about Danish colonial history. It's that we need to learn something about, how is it framed? Rigsfællesskabet and the Arctic, right? North Atlantic, yeah. Yeah, lots of work to do. Then I have a final question. And I don't know if this is meant as a joke, but I'm going to take this seriously. So the question is, what do you think we should do on Monday? So this is the question, what is the immediate action we can do to, you know, now we're having this conversation here in this platform, the Greenlandic House, we're hosting this, but how do we please on Monday take this into our respective work environments? How do we have these conversations over lunch? Should we?
No, I think what we should do on Monday, I think if we are Greenlanders, to start with ourselves, you know, read up on our history and learn from it, I think. And if you are Danes, start to read up on the same history and find out. But I think more than anything else, just, you know, again, be normal people to other normal people and talk about what. And you don't have to talk about Greenland when you talk with a Greenlander and a Dane. You can talk about anything, and that'll tell you something about Greenland anyway.
So important.
So I think that, you know, try to defocus a little bit and just look at this as a normal human interaction. I think that's the most important. And we heard in your introduction that, you know, Mandela's most important sentence was the one he didn't say when he stood there and said nothing in 5 minutes.
Yeah, I can only agree with you, and I think you've said it. You should have the final word. Be a people with other people. That's it, right?
Be a people with other people and do that, not just on Monday, but going forward. When you walk out these doors, please take that with you from here. So a very big thank you to both of you, Minik Rosing, Nick Shepherd, and thank you for all your questions. It's been really informative, interesting, and hopefully also fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Og så siger jeg, nu har vi en rigtig god pause med kaffe og kage. Og inden vi starter næste oplæg, så har jeg lovet lige at give Hardy 5 minutter, hvor I sidder, efter I har spist jeres kage. Og så vil han forklare om sit isprint. Godt. Tak.